Here we are again. This time we're going to be talking about Chapter 9, legal descriptions. And you know what? There's more than one type of legal description, more than one type of everything in this course. But you think of a legal description as your address. That could be one, but it's not as good. So let's take a look at different legal descriptions, okay? Describing land. A deed, a mortgage, a trust deed require legally sufficient description of a property to be binding. They want more than just your address. Legally sufficient allows a competent surveyor to locate the parcel. That's when they come and do a survey on your property. A legal description is based on information from a survey. The street address, as I said, is not legally sufficient to identify your property. You have to go with that whole long thing. If you pull out your deed, your mortgage loan, or anything from when you bought your property, you'll see this whole paragraph. Sometimes if it's a condominium, you may have 3 pages of a legal description. It could be very long at that point in time. So let's look at our different types of describing real property, okay? Our first type is our very oldest method. And our very oldest method will be meets and bounds. And then we're going to talk about a confusing method because it's known as the rectangular survey method, also known as the government survey method. And when you deal with the government, everything gets confusing. And the last one we're going to talk about is a simple one too, lot and block, based on a recorded plat. It's a lot of subdivisions. A legal description is a detailed way of describing a parcel of land that would be accepted on specific documents in the court, based on information collected in a survey. Meets and bounds, it's your oldest type, used in the original 13 colonies, which nobody was around back then, nobody here that I know of. Meets means distance, bounds means compass direction or angle. Meets and bounds description relies on physical features to determine the boundaries and measurements, and is the least reliable. Okay, it's the least reliable. Keep that in your head. Meets and bounds always starts at a point of beginning, POB. So if you see a legal description that says it starts at the point of beginning, it's automatically meets and bounds. You don't have to go any further. And then the surveyor proceeds around the property boundaries, recording them, referring to linear measurements or natural or artificial landmarks, and ends back up at the point of beginning, completely enclosing the parcel. It goes clockwise. They go clockwise. Okay? So it starts at the point of beginning and ends at the point of beginning. A meets and bounds legal description will also use the terms more or less. And they'll use monuments at times. Those are fixed natural or man-made objects to identify the place of beginning or the boundary segments. The problem we have, though, is monuments can disappear or move. Ooh. Let me give you an example, okay? Let's start in the northwest corner of this lot by the old oak tree. You got it? You all with me? And then we're going to start there, and we're going to go clockwise. We're going to go south 500 feet, more or less. What is it? 500 feet? 520 feet? 470 feet? More or less. To the Big Boulder by Jones Road. You following me? Then we're going to go west to Smith Creek. Then we're going to go north to the old farmhouse. Then we're going to go in a straight line back to the point of beginning, 400 feet more or less. Now, what can happen? What can happen to the old farmhouse? What can happen to the creek? What can happen to the Big Boulder or Jones Road? What can happen to those roads? Get widened? Get moved? Large trees, lakes. Can the lake dry up? Can the creek dry up? Highways. Do they move highways at times or roads at times? Yes, they do. So today when they use a meets and bounds legal description, they usually entail it with the government survey system. So remember that. But if you see it entailed with the government survey system, but if it has the words beginning at and more or less, your answer will always be it's a meets and bounds description. That's something I hope you can remember. One thing I'm going to tell you in this chapter 9, you probably can read it 101 times and still be confused. So you may want to listen to me, and I can sum it up in more or less like 15 minutes or even less, and try to make it simple. This is one chapter I never could understand till I had to start teaching it, and then I better have understood it in order to teach it to you simply. Okay? Things to remember with a meets and bounds. Meets and bounds always has a point of beginning, and it always ends at the point of beginning. Uses words such as more or less, and it could be combined with the rectangular survey system, or also could be combined with the lot and block system. Nah, not really the lot and block, but mostly the rectangular survey system, known as the government survey system, the confusing one. Now we're going to go to the most confusing one of them all, that takes up most of your textbook, most of this chapter. Rectangular, also known as the government survey system. It was established by Congress in 1785 to standardize the description of land acquired by the federal government. It's based on artificially placed groups of lines running throughout the country. They're artificial, you don't see them. Okay? Principal meridians. If you look in chapter 9 at the map of Illinois, principal meridians go up and down, so they run north and south. Baselines go east and west. Keep that in mind. In Illinois, locations are described in relationship to one of 3 meridians, either principal meridian 2, 3, or 4. Only 2 of these principal meridians run through the state of Illinois. The second principal meridian is located in Indiana, but can be used to describe property here in the state of Illinois. The third principal meridian will begin, look at that map in your textbook on chapter 9, will begin down at Cairo, Illinois, and extend northward through Centralia and northward near Rockford to the Illinois-Wisconsin border. That's your third principal meridian. So a principal meridian, if you were asked the principal meridian that just runs just west of Rockford down through Centralia, Illinois, third principal meridian. Your fourth is more or less on the west end of Illinois. It begins near Beardstown and extends northward to Wisconsin. Baselines basically go east and west. Okay, you have a baseline on top between Illinois and Wisconsin. You have a baseline that's down there by Beardstown. Baselines don't have any names, they're just called baselines. Other elements in a rectangular survey, government survey, is township tiers, ranges. Township tiers are lines that run east and west parallel to the baselines. Ranges run north and south parallel to the meridians. Don't waste too much time on that, please. Okay, but they interchange and they intersect. And by them intersecting, we get a township square. So whenever the baseline and the township tiers intersect, they create a township square. Township squares are 6 square miles and contain 36 square miles. Okay, so look in your chapter 9, look at your one page. Your one page will have basically a township like this made up of 36 sections. That's a township square. Okay, every one of those squares that you see on the chart is 1 square mile, 1 mile by 1 mile. Also, 1 mile equals 5,280 linear feet, something you need to know. You have certain numbers you're going to need to know in this course. So township 1 is 5,280 feet by 5,280 feet. And when we multiply length times width, we get the square footage. And every section, every one of those boxes contains 640 acres. Now, I'm sure we've all had grandparents or parents that told us they had to walk so far to school when they were a kid. That's what you tell your kids. You had to walk so far to school. Your parents didn't drive you. Well, back in the early days, section 16, box 16 was known as your school section. That's where they used to build all the schools. Well, today they build them all over the place because of the growth and the population. But if Grandma and Grandpa lived down in Section 36, they would have had to walk all the way up to Section 16 to school. So is Grandma and Grandpa fibbing when they told you they had to walk all those miles to school? No, they weren't. Wow, think of it. We have it easy today. Okay, we have it easy. Now, there are important measurements you should know. What? Well, that entire township, those 36 boxes we just saw, that's a township. It's 6 miles by 6 miles, and it equals 36 sections. One of those sections is 1 mile by 1 mile, 1 square mile. 1 times 1 is 1. We learned this back in grade school, didn't we? Now, one number you have to know, because I told you one section is 640 acres, correct? You have to know that too. But also, how many square feet are in an acre? Well, you see our next number, 43,560. Well, there is 43,560 square feet in 1 acre. Wow. That's how far Grandma and Grandpa had to walk, think. And every one of those sections had 640 acres. Wow. How do you remember that? Well, most licensees that have taken the courses 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they remember this one number one way, 7-Eleven. Now, why does Roseanne say 7-Eleven? Well, take 4 plus 3. That equals 7, correct? 560. 5 plus 6 equals 11. That's how I was taught when I first got my very first license, 7-Eleven. But I had one class, basically, they told me they remembered it a different way. And I don't care how you remember these, but you need to remember them. This other class remembered 4 old ladies doing 35 in a 60-mile-an-hour zone. If that's the way you remember, I don't care. So what other numbers do you need to remember? You need to remember there's 5,280 linear feet in 1 mile. So going home from work tomorrow, you see a sign, construction sign that says, construction ahead, 5,280 feet. Well, how far ahead is that construction? It's 1 mile. You know that now. 1 square yard. A square yard. How many feet are in a yard? Many students don't remember yardsticks. Well, in a yardstick, there's 3 feet, right? So in 1 yard, there's 3 feet, right? So in a square yard, square is length times width. So you take 3, because there's 3 feet in a yard, right? Times 3. What's 3 times 3? So in 1 square yard, you have 9 square feet. Make sense? You will have maybe one math question talking about cubic yards. Cubic or cubic feet, cubic yards is length times width times height. So if a square yard is 9 square feet, well, how many cubic feet are in 1 cubic yard? Well, 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 equals 27. So there's 27 cubic feet in 1 cubic yard. These are things you need to remember. Could have a couple questions pertaining to that. 1 square mile, I already told you, was 1 section, also known as 640 acres. 1 square mile is also 5,280 feet times 5,280 feet. So those I cannot memorize for you. Those you'd have to memorize on your own, but try to find some tricks to help you remember certain things. Okay, try to find some tricks. Your government survey, I will tell you, you possibly will have maybe one math question like this down the road. This is the rectangular survey description, and I'm going to tell you it's the government survey system. Now, yes, you can calculate this question to find out how many acres it has by going forwards. But I want you to remember to always calculate these backwards. Why? Because of instead of a question like your example here, example the south half, you could have 4 different diagrams saying which diagram matches this description. And if you do it forward, you're going to get it wrong. If you do it backwards, you'll get it right. So if you remember the government, you go backwards all the time, you're guaranteed to get it right. So let's say the question is asking you for the south half of the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter of section 11, township 8 north, range 6 west of the 4th principal meridian. Now your head is spinning and spinning and spinning. Well, there's distractors. I'm asking how many acres are in that legal description. Forget about everything. Forget about section 11, forget about township 8 north, forget about range 6 west of the 4th principal meridian. Take that out of the question, throw it in the garbage can, okay? Now, I had told you how many acres are in one section, in one box. Can anybody remember? 640, I heard somebody say. So every section has 640 acres. Now, one thing I want you to be aware of, if you run across the word "and" in this legal description, or a semicolon, you have to stop and start all over. That means you're dealing with two separate sections. I won't wake you up now. So we will always start these questions, and your book doesn't explain it this simple. I hope I will to you. We will always start these questions with 640 acres, because there's 640 acres in one section, correct? So on your piece of paper in front of you, I want you to put down 640 acres. Then we threw section 11, all that stuff in the garbage can. So we're going to start with the southeast quarter. Is everybody following me? We're starting at the end. So you're going to take that 640, divide it by the bottom denominator, the 4. We want 640, and we want you to divide it by 4. And what do you get? 640 divided by 4? You should come up with 160, correct? Okay, we're going to continue on. Now we run across the northwest quarter. Everybody see that? So we're going to take that 160 and we're going to divide it by the 4, the bottom denominator of the northwest quarter. So 160 divided by 4 equals what? I hear somebody say 40. Is that correct? Yeah. Now we're going to continue backwards, and with 40, we're going to basically take 1/2 of 40. So 40 divided by 2 equals what? 40 divided by 2, you can do that in your head. 20, right? So this legal description here contains 20 acres. That's all it contains. Was that simple? Now, if you had a question that said the south half of the northwest quarter or the southeast quarter, and let's say the south half of the northwest quarter, well, then you'd have 2 separate times you have to do it, okay? You have to stop and start all over again and add the 2 together. So remember to look first for a semicolon or and, because that means you're dealing with 2 separate sections. I hope that makes it a little bit simpler. If you still have questions, please feel free to call me or email me. I'm more than happy to review this. It's so simple compared to reading that textbook in this chapter. I should tell you, forget about it. Okay? This chapter at least. So that's our rectangular survey system. It's the most confusing one. It's a government survey system. Now we're going to talk about the lot and block recorded plat system. It's another easy one. You know, Metes and Bounds uses the words beginning at, more or less. Well, lot and block will use the words lot and block. It may be incorporated with the government survey system, but it's still, if you see the words lot and block, it's a lot and block system. It uses lot and block numbers referred to on a plat map, which is in your textbook, which is filed in the public records of the county where the land's located. It's often used to describe property in subdivisions. They always refer to prior Metes and Bounds or rectangular survey description, so it's always encompassed with one of them. With a lot and block description, you have identifiers that you know it's definitely going to be a lot and block description. The lot and block number. What lot is it? What block is it? The name and number of the subdivision plat, and the name of the county and the state. It's a lot and block, okay? Surveys. When you buy a property, many times the seller has to provide a survey less than 6 months old. It's all in the contract. Whatever the contract states depends upon what type of survey you get or if you get one. There's more than one type of surveys, though. A spot survey will show the location, size, and shape of buildings on the lot. A stake survey will have stakes in the corners. A survey will also show easements, building lines, etc., etc. You always want to make sure you have a most current survey, mostly if you're going to be adding on to your property and that. And then if you own a condominium, well, I own Unit 101, you own Unit 201. Do we take up the same amount of land? Yes. Well, they measure elevations. Properties may be subdivided the air above their land into air lots. The condominium laws require that a surveyor prepare a plat map that shows the elevations of the floor and ceiling surfaces. And that's based on their official datum. They based it on the datum. They're measuring the air that you own. They're measuring the air. And subsurface rights are measured below the datum. Air rights are measured above the datum. Datum is a point or a line or surface from which elevations are measured. So that's how they measured the elevations. And now, was Chapter 9 that difficult? Honestly, if you read it on your own, your head was probably spinning, but I hope I helped explain it a little bit better to you. Okay, now you're going to go and you're going to do your Module 3 quiz. I wish you the best of luck on it, and remember, all the numbers you need to. I don't care if you have to look up your answers. Many students retain the information better by looking up their answers in their textbook. Good luck. See you shortly.